Hello and welcome to Americans Learn. My name is Lauren, and today I'm going to be looking at a video from Side Projects, because it's been a minute since I've looked at a video from Side Projects. So this one is Ancient Civilizations That Just Vanished. I do want to apologize. Again, we're still in a little bit of a weird place right now when it comes to rebuilding everything. So things are still a little bit weird, a little bit wonky. I apologize for any weird audio issues. But we did want to make sure that y'all still getting some content. So again, thank you for your patience as we fix this situation that I have put us in. And now let's learn a little bit of history from good old Simon.
Throughout the history of
Dang.
mankind, countless...
Okay, coming hard out of the gate. Fuck. All right. Oh, okay, oops, I swore very quickly in this video. I'm gonna get demonetized.
Throughout the history of mankind, countless civilizations have crumbled and fallen due to war, internal conflict, natural disasters, and much more. Many of these collapses are well known and documented in detail, such as the fall of Rome or the conquest of the Aztecs, but others remain shrouded in mystery. Despite years of research and significant advances in technology, there are some civilizations that just seemed to have abruptly ended, vanishing without much of a trace. And today we're going to take a look at some of them.
Ooh. Minoans. I've heard of them.
Often regarded as one of the first civilizations of Europe, the Minoans were a people that lived on the island of Crete, with evidence showing that urban communities first began coming together as long ago as 2000 BC. Because this was in the distant past, a lot of the details are quite murky. But from the archaeological evidence that we do have, it's clear that Minoan society was quite advanced, with highly skilled craftsmen, artisans, and architects. They also had well-connected trade routes with other civilizations around the Mediterranean, and their artists were so talented that they even were hired by Egypt to paint frescoes at Avaris.
Dang, those are cool. I mean, that's where Spain got the idea, I guess, huh? to fuck around with the bulls. I'm so sorry. I'm a sweary girl today.
Along with frescoes, the Minoans left behind pottery, statues, and...
I've seen that one. Oh, I've seen that one with the octopus. I didn't realize it was a Minoan vase. Falls, whatever. Ooh, it's a little kraken. It's got all the little sailors in its little kraken grips. I'm in a weird mood.
Statues, and every other type of art that you can imagine. They also constructed impressive palaces, with the most famous being the one at Knossos, home to Europe's first paved roads and running water.
Cool.
One thing that we don't know is the language they spoke. It appears that the island developed two forms of written language over the years, which have been dubbed Cretan hieroglyphs and Linear A. These have yet to be fully deciphered, but from what we've learned so far, the language doesn't seem to be closely related to any familiar tongue. The bigger mystery, though, is what on earth happened to them. Sometime around 1500 BC, Minoan society went into a sharp decline and essentially disappeared from the map. For a while, it was assumed that the end of the Minoans was related to the Greater Late Bronze Age collapse, but in fact, the end of the Minoan civilization came a few hundred years too early to be confidently included in this. However, one event that very closely coincides with the collapse is the volcanic eruption at Thera, today also known as Santorini, a smaller island to the north. This was an immense eruption and could have caused tsunamis to strike the islands the Minoans called home, as well as deposit thick layers of ash and harm their agriculture, all of which could easily contribute to the end of society. But recent evidence shows that there actually wasn't much ash, and it seems as if the wind had been blowing in the opposite direction, along with clay tablets that appear to have been written more than 50 years after the volcano's eruption, detailing architectural projects that wouldn't be expected in a destroyed economy. This has led to the theory that the volcanic eruption didn't end the civilization in an instant, but rather led to severe environmental effects that slowly squeezed the life out of the island over a few generations, eventually forcing their descendants to abandon Crete.
That's a bummer, because then you think that you're fine. You're like, the wind's in the right going away, and you think you're all right, but then slowly the environment changes a little bit, the farming changes a little, just things are just a little different, and then a little different, and then a little different, and then suddenly the island's unlivable. Oof, rough. Because then you barely know what's going on. If something happened 50 years ago that was a huge environmental thing, and then especially if you didn't have good history books or whatever, as oral traditions or you might not put it together, that it was the volcano that did it, because it's like, yeah, but the volcano didn't land on us. I wonder if like that kind of thing happened when Mount St. Helens exploded, with like, if 50 years later people were still feeling the effects of that explosion. I wonder if that'll happen when Yellowstone goes up. Like, cause that's a freaking water volcano. It's like the caldera of that is like, we're I think they're keeping an eye on it because they're kind of expecting it to explode. This is something I feel like I've said something like that before and I was corrected, but like, if Yellowstone explodes, a lot of people are in a lot of trouble.
But other historians dispute the claim that the volcano had much to do with the collapse at all. Key to this claim is the evidence of destruction around the island that doesn't seem consistent with natural disasters, as certain areas seem to have been spared from the carnage. For instance,
his problem is that he explains things in such a way that I'm like, yes, I believe him. And then he's like, but actually, and I'm like, no, but you just said a thing that I believed. And then I went off on a tangent about it.
The town at Knossos was burned to the ground, while the palace was left untouched. Natural disasters would have destroyed all of it indiscriminately, but internal warring parties may have spared their most sacred building during an armed conflict. In any case, we don't have all the answers. Perhaps completely deciphering the written records will shed some light on what really happens, but as for right now, the cause of their collapse is largely still a mystery.
Ancestral Puebloans.
Also called the Anasazi, the ancestral Puebloans
The
were an
Anasazi.
ancient Native American culture that inhabited the American Southwest, centered mostly near the Four Corners area of Utah, Arizona, Colorado, and New Mexico. Their largest settlements are among the most well-known Native American architecture, comprised of cliff dwellings, carved and built on the underside of large rock faces, such as Cliff Palace in Mesa Verde National Park in Colorado. These cliff communities, housed up to several hundred people, contained communal areas for worship and display clear evidence of agriculture. However, sometime around the 13th century, these beautiful homes were suddenly abandoned. As for what could cause these tribes to leave such well-established communities behind and search for a new place to live, there are a few theories. The first is that their move was necessitated by drought. Investigations have shown that many of these settlements were constructed during periods of heavy rainfall, which made agriculture simpler and didn't require advanced irrigation. However, beginning around 1150, North America went through a period known as the Great Drought, which could have degraded soil quality and made this style of farming no longer viable, forcing the communities to pack their bags and move to more favorable locations. But warfare's always a potential explanation. In this case, some academics posit that the true reason for the abandonment of the sites was the arrival of other tribes that were more nomadic in nature, such as the Utes and the Paiutes, bringing violence that forced the Puebloans to leave as their large cities made them easy targets for raids. Evidence for violence was first found in a 1997 excavation that unearthed 24 skeletons showing clear indications of a violent death and even cannibalism. Others argue that this isn't conclusive evidence and that the cannibalism and violent death may have other possible explanations, such as ritual combat for religious purposes, or even that the bones aren't from the Puebloans themselves and are simply from a small and nomadic tribe that took refuge on the site for a few years long after it was abandoned by its creators. Unlike many other civilizations in this video, the Puebloans did not die out completely, and their descendants are still alive and known today, with many of their oral histories maintained throughout the many generations. But unfortunately, without written language, we may never know the true reason they suddenly left their grand cities.
Yeah. Come here. That is always a pity, like, if there's nothing written down. Although I will say, like, we got a lot of stuff written down now, but so much of it is, like, so hard to parse, like, what is actually true. There's so many different sides of every story, and it's like thinking about it in a thousand years, trying to figure out what's going on right now. People are going to be like, there's just so many options to look at to see what's actually going on. And then you've got the memes, and then we have the memes. So it's like, I do wonder, and like, humans don't really change, like, in that kind of thing. So I wonder how many, like, of these artifacts and stuff that we have now that, like, we haven't translated or whatever, but it's really just some, like, 800 BC version of lost.jpg. Like what how many memes do we still have? Like, because you know the memes are gonna last. Like, no one will know what they mean, but they'll know. But like, they'll think it was something like amazing, but it was not. It was, the dodgeball of Apollo or something. Like, people are like, what is that? If you don't know what that is, you're missing out. The dodgeball of Apollo was very funny to me.
At its peak, the Khmer Empire ruled over most of Southeast Asia, and during their time in power, the civilization constructed impressive monuments such as the famous Angkor Wat. They are believed to have been the most complex.
Heard of Angkor Wat? Have I heard of Angkor? I feel like I've heard of it, but then maybe I'm thinking about Angkor Wat from Troll Hunters.
Pre-industrial society on Earth, even inventing what is regarded as the first healthcare system spread out over more than 1,000 hospitals.
Wow.
However, this all came to an end in the mid-15th century, where the archaeological record suddenly contains a near 300-year gap in writing, only showing that the majority of sites were abandoned and then later re-inhabited by many different groups.
Dang.
Traditionally, this sudden decline has been attributed to war with the Siamese Ayutthaya Kingdom, who conquered the capital Angkor in the 1400s, but many scholars point out that in such a large empire, the changing of power in the capital might not have been enough to completely destroy a civilization that spanned such a large area, and so there seems to be more going on than meets the eye. One of the main theories centers on water management. The Khmer had an extensive canal and irrigation system in place with numerous reservoirs that were used for cultivating rice. Their agriculture was so effective that they were clocking in 3 rice harvests a year, which is what allowed the population to rise so steadily for so many decades.
Okay.
However, this rising population may
That's
have
a lot.
outpaced the water system, which combined with a couple of minor droughts could have brought the whole rice economy to a breaking point and resulted in anarchy. There's also the opposite theory, that instead of some small droughts, there were a few years of heavy, intense monsoons which were so strong that they damaged the water canals across the region to the point that they couldn't be repaired before chaos erupted and everyone had to fend for themselves. There's also the theory that the plague was to blame. After all, it was during the 14th and 15th centuries that the Black Death was ravaging Europe, and the bubonic plague was known to have struck China as well. With such a large population and such complex urban settlements, if it arrived, the plague could have devastated the Khmer, leaving them vulnerable to all manner of other threats at the same time.
Oh, like
Final
Diana?
civilization for this video isn't just one per se, but rather an entire geographic region. Due to a lack of written
I was like, oh, the Amazons? Were they real?
It isn't known for certain just how many people lived in Central and South America before the arrival of European powers, and the true numbers have been debated for many years. But the important thing to note here is that while for years these people have been typically portrayed as jungle-dwelling tribes that were still largely hunter-gatherer types, we now know that there were many civilizations that were actually quite advanced in the pre-Columbian era. For example, a new study from 2024 found one city in the Amazon that had been hidden by thick vegetation for thousands of years and showed evidence of neatly paved roads, gardens, and canals, and may have been home to 100,000 people. The idea that there were numerous cities and even large organized civilizations spanning the continent is consistent with the records of early European travelers who explored the region, such as Gaspar de Carvajal, who wrote of seeing huge numbers of peoples, settlements, and tribes as he floated along the Amazon River. He described them as being so numerous and advanced that once his chronicles were published back in Europe, they were widely dismissed as wild exaggerations or even outright lies.
Of course they were, because, Europeans could not believe that somebody not European could possibly be advanced in any kind of way. God.
Sentiment that remains the consensus for hundreds of years. It was thought that the soil was too acidic in the Amazon for large agriculture to take place, and of course there was no shortage of racism involved in thinking that these people were too primitive to form such advanced societies. However, in recent years, more and more findings have emerged showing that Carvajal wasn't exaggerating at all, and in fact that his words didn't even capture the full scope of just how many people lived in the Amazon at the time. The key to these new findings is a technology called LiDAR, which scans an area using lasers to paint a picture of the surface.
Cool.
They can spot things like stone structures, even if they're covered by thick vegetation.
Sick! Okay.
Using LiDAR from aircraft, researchers have found thousands upon thousands of hidden structures across the Amazon.
Oh my God, that's
indicating
awesome.
That there were indeed massive populations here throughout history, and that they were far more organized than previously believed. Investigators.
And then in that case, all it takes is one stray cough from one European settler colonialist or whatever, and like you could wipe out everybody because again they don't have the right antibodies to like deal with the common cold of the European, you know, like they grew up in a different environment, they have different antibodies.
Dating these sites on foot, scientists have found charcoal, pottery shards, tools, and rock art. Most impressive of all, in 2018, a team of archaeologists discovered what they believe to be a series of interconnected fortified settlements spanning over 1,000 miles, indicating that the population was over 1 million people in just 7% of the Amazon rainforest. This was in direct contradiction to the long-held belief that the population of the entire Amazon at the time was just 2 million. Jose Ariarte,
oh my God,
one of the archaeologists,
that is a big difference in number. Holy crap.
Said that the finding was so significant that, quote, we need to reevaluate the history of the Amazon. And the more we search, the more we find, bringing estimates of the total population upwards of 20 million or more in the region.
Dang.
But in just a few short decades, the vast majority of these civilizations would vanish off the face of the earth and disappear without a trace, leaving their cities to be reclaimed by the Amazon and lost for hundreds of years, becoming myths that would only be confirmed by modern technology. By 1900, the population of the area was estimated to be just 200,000, meaning that potentially 99% of the region's population had died off. The culprit here is almost certainly disease. The adventures of early explorers through the region introduced the locals to old world diseases such as smallpox, for which they had no previous exposure or immunity. And with our new knowledge of how interconnected and vast the societies were across the Amazon, it's even easier to see how things like smallpox and measles could have spread rapidly to bring an entire continent to its knees.
I mean, just look at what happened with freaking COVID. Like, it took nothing, and suddenly it's this worldwide thing, and it's everywhere, and people are. I mean, people still are getting it. Like, it's not gone. It's still around. It's still people are still coming down with it all the time. It's like I can totally see, and it did kill a lot of people. Like, I absolutely could see how disease would wipe out that many people, especially, without like modern medical technology. It's like gonzo. Yeah, absolutely. That sucks.
Genocide was also a factor for the settlements, unfortunate enough to be directly harmed by conquest, especially in Central America, but disease outpaced warfare across the continent, likely killing most with sickness before guns and swords even had a chance. It's terribly tragic, and even more so because these people left almost no records behind, leaving potentially hundreds or even thousands of years of the history of tens of millions of people under a complete and utter mystery.
All right. Well, that was fascinating. I always like these videos. I don't know if anybody else really likes these videos or if it's just me, but I like them. I think they're so fascinating. And again, I like Simon. I've been following his career for quite a while now. And I like a lot of his stuff. And I always have. So I really enjoyed that. I hope y'all did too. Next time, it looks like we've got science myths that you still believe. And I'm definitely going to watch that. So y'all just have to bear with me on that one. Don't forget, we do have 2 other channels that you could take a peek at. We've got, there's the Chicago Reacts. There's a lot of like gaming stuff on there. I'm going through Dragon Ball Z Abridged over there. We also have Shiganime, which is anime, and primarily an anime channel. I did watch Has Been Hotel over there on Shiganime. There's and then like Kit's watching Goblin Slayer right now. He just finished Garen Lagann. I'm doing a couple of shows over there. I'm watching a bunch of stuff over there right now, honestly. I've got my friend Alec and I are watching Black Clover. My friend Jess and I are doing, what's the one that I'm Frieren. We just finished Bochi the Rock and the Apothecary Diaries as well. I'm also watching Spy Family over on that show. Like, we've got so much stuff over there on the Shiganime channel. So if you haven't gotten enough of me here, go and check me out. Check out Kit's stuff on the other channels, and we will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.